Hi, welcome people coming in. I'm going to wait for a minute and then start. So, just waiting for 1 second to start on time. We do record these, so if for any reason you have to leave or anything like that, I'll still start. And you can always watch the replay if you can't stay for the whole thing. But welcome to the people coming in, and I'll start right at 1. Um, just to give people just a chance to make it. Or 1 Mountain Time, whatever time you guys are in. Hey, it's officially 1 o'clock and I'm going to get started. It says my name is Carrie, but my name is Karina. And I'm going to do this webinar about media literacy in a tech environment. So, welcome for coming in. If you are joining us, as I mentioned, we do record these. So, even if there's not that many people, you're welcome to watch the replay of this at any point. So, first of all, we're Digital Respons-Ability, and we do these monthly webinars. We were founded in 2016 by Carrie, and we teach digital citizenship in the state of Utah. And then we also do a lot of different webinars and other programs and things like that. So my name is Karina. I know it says Carrie on the bottom here, but I'm just using our admin account. So my name is Karina. I have a master's in communications, and I'm our operations director. And so I'm going to just talk a little bit about this media literacy that a lot of people care about right now. So I have some polls. I'm going to put this as a poll question. If you're a teacher or a parent, just you can click on it. Tell me like what devices your kids or students are using. If it's all of the above, I'm not sure if it lets you pick all of the above. So I guess maybe pick the most popular one if there is anything. Yeah, it looks like mostly everyone's saying tablets, which obviously everybody has access to, I think, at this point, even if they don't have their own personal devices. I think kids have tablets at school, of course, and access at any point, right? Even if they go to someone else's houses or anything. So depending on the age, of course, as they get older, they get some phones and things like that. And of course, we have smartwatches now. My second question, which will be my other poll, is okay. So mostly everyone said tablets and devices, which of course we know. How do they consume their information? So I have a couple of responses. Is it through friends, teachers? I guess I should have put other. Um, is it actual news sources? That's pretty rare. Most of the kids I teach doesn't happen. But social media, of course, right? The newest thing right now is that most people get most of their information from TikTok. Whether they actually care if it's true or not isn't really relevant, right? They just get their information from TikTok. So just curious what you're hearing or what you know from your kids or your students if you're a teacher. Typically, we know that they get most of their information from their friends, which just looks like what people are responding, um, or from, like I said, social media. Um, Sadly, not news sources, right? That's the problem. So that's kind of the main thing I saw with friends. So and then the last thing that I'll ask, which you can respond or you can just think about, what are the ways that you're helping them discern helpful versus non-helpful information? We're going to talk about that. Obviously, that's the point of this webinar today. But if you have any feedback or you want to add something to the chat at any point as we're talking, feel free to do that. We obviously want to teach kids how to access information in a healthy and helpful way, but it's easier said than done, right? It's easy for us to say, make sure the source is verifiable, but let's be real, a lot of adults don't do that either. so so the next thing I'm going to just kind of do a little intro about kids and tech. Obviously we know this, but children are using tech at a younger ages. We work with kids as young as kindergartners and are also doing some pre-K starter programs, and kids use tech earlier and earlier. I have a 5-year-old and he was capable of opening my phone. I mean, it was locked, but if I unlocked it for him, he could go online and turn on the app, basically find the app he wanted to use and watch videos when he was like 18 months old, right? So they know how to do that. So what's happening at these ages when they're younger? Part of what's happening is that we've seen that television is still most popular. Honestly, also my son who's 5, he of course I try to limit his screen time, but he uses the computer. I mean, he doesn't use a computer, he uses TV a lot. He With all of our smart TVs now, we have buttons for YouTube, right? So that's his number one favorite thing to do is YouTube. So and he can click on the button. He still can't even read and he knows what the YouTube button is. So that's not helpful, but it just, with tablets and phones and TVs and everything everywhere, obviously our kids just have more access than they used to have, right? I'm not going to read all these bullet points, but you get some of the stats from that. Um, Other things that are popular are voice activated devices, right? Like Alexa. We can ask Alexa pretty much anything, right? We have an Alexa show, which is like the little video one. And my son's favorite thing to do is just to like go record videos himself. Because he watches so much YouTube, he thinks he's making himself YouTube, but it just lives in our Alexa. It doesn't actually go anywhere else. Lives in our Amazon photos. But we've noticed that obviously now that we have a lot of these devices in our houses, kids can ask questions and hear responses. And hopefully it's accurate, but who really knows, right? Where's Alexa getting her information, right? There's also apps targeted to younger kids, right? And of course, some of these apps can be good. We don't advocate, we're not talking about screen time here. We're going to talk about media literacy, but there are good apps out there, but there are also apps that, parents should pay attention to and make sure that they know and understand. Um, so one of the other things to talk about with this conversation about media literacy and being in a tech environment is just understanding how kids' brains work with technology. Um, so at age 3, kids have what we call the transfer deficit, which it's hard for them to understand what's real or what's not real, right? And I think that's true for all of us in some sense, but they really don't really know the difference. So there's guidelines from the American Pediatrics Association about how much screen time kids should have, but like I said, this isn't really about that. So we won't go into it, but it is good to know that under 3, they really struggle to know the difference between what's on a screen and what's real. I mean, even adults and teens do that, right? Children like being talked to, right? They like to have interaction. One thing we do talk about when we discuss screen time is the difference between passive and active communication, right? So passive communication is going to be, or passive interaction with screens is just watching TV, right? Scrolling, watching YouTube, all those things. Whereas, if you're playing an educational game or using something in school, that's a lot more interactive. Even playing video games with yourself or with friends is a lot more interactive, right? And those are huge differences in how we're interacting with technology and what we're learning from it. When you're passively scrolling through something, you're getting tidbits of information as adults, right? So we're in social media and we find tidbits of information. How much are we vetting a source, or how much are we verifying what it is, right? Just depends. Um, and also how this is, how are we encouraging good decision making online? So it's kind of what I was talking about with screen time can be passive, but it shouldn't always be, right? It's okay to have some vegging time and things like that, but it shouldn't always be passive activity. um, and Heather, it said you asked for the sources. I have a reference page at the end, so it should be on there, but I can also send we send this recording out too, so it should be there if you want to pause it. Sorry, I just saw your question. So screen time is passive, and when it can be passive, it can be proactive as well, right? But the thing that you want to kind of think about is to ask questions like, what is the activity you're doing? Is it going to be something that you can interact with? Like I said, I don't think it's a bad thing to have some vegging time, whether it's a screen or whatever. We all do it. We all want to come home and just watch stuff, right? But it's just how much of that are you allowing, right? And again, I'm not trying to get into huge screen time discussion, but thinking about as they're interacting and consuming media, what you want to think about is how passive is it, right? As we've gotten, and I kind of talk about this later, but we've consumed media in smaller and smaller snippets at this point. So we want to make sure that what we're consuming is accurate, right? And it's a lot harder to do in a split second when you're just watching a 2-second video. Um, so one thing is to try to be proactive with your children, or if you're a teacher, if you're with your students, ask them what they would want to do online, ask them how to find out more information about a subject, and try to make it kind of put it on them. Like, what would you do? What, that's one thing that it can help. Um, the biggest thing that we advocate for, regardless whether we're talking about screen time or media literacy, is teaching kids how to self-regulate, right? I know a lot of teachers that's a big concern for them as well, teaching their kids how to navigate these things on their own. We're not advocating that you should, give every kid a tablet and let them go crazy on their own. But at the same time, we do want to encourage parents and teachers and anyone who's working with kids to be proactive, because technology is not really going away, right? Everyone uses it right now. We use it as adults and parents and teachers. And so instead of trying to like completely ban our kids from anything, we need to make sure that we're proactively helping guide them to a point of being able to self-regulate. Otherwise, they're just going to struggle even more when they leave or when they get into high school and everyone has a phone and all those things. So some elements of self-regulation are wait your turn, have some breaks, ask yourself how this makes you feel. And then, of course, doing things outside of screens or even on screens. If you're doing a puzzle on a screen, it's still better. It's more interactive than just passively watching something, right? Like I said, there's a lot of great educational programs out there. And we definitely embrace anything that helps a kid, but we want to just make sure that it's something that they're actually getting something out of. So now to kind of discuss a little bit more about media literacy and why it's important and relevance to this technology, a couple things. So media literacy by definition is understanding how the internet works, learning the history of the internet, using critical thinking skills when interpreting information on the internet. One thing is how to identify fake news. Another thing that, and we're going to talk about these things, knowing if you're in a bubble. And we're all in bubbles, honestly. It doesn't matter if you, like, we're not even talking about politics. It could be your bubble of how you grew up, how you're raised, where you live, what country you're from, what community you live in. All of those are bubbles, and they come from make our frame of reference. So we know that about ourselves, but understanding it and understanding where what bubbles we're in. It doesn't mean that they're bad. We can be happy and comfortable in our bubbles. Like I can be happy and comfortable in the bubble of where I live, but it's still important to acknowledge that my bubble is different. Every time we leave our house and go to a different place, my husband's always like, "This is a lot different than where we live." I'm like, "No kidding." It's just a completely different place, right? And then lateral reading. I'm going to talk about that too, and that's another way that you can help kids or talk about how you don't have to say lateral reading if they don't, if they're too young to understand that concept, but the skill set is something that's helpful. So the first question I have is, why do we share things that are fake? Um, I think that we could all think about that for a second, and we kind of know. For most people, we share things because either A, we think it's true, or B, it elicits some kind of reaction or emotion, right? Mostly everything on the internet is emotion driven, right? So 4 types of fake news are satire, clickbait, malicious intent, and propaganda. So obviously, satire is essentially just things, being like, we know satire is fake, like the onion, like this example right here. But it's funny, right? That's the point. It's funny, it's fun to interact with. Clickbait obviously is more geared towards companies, news, media, things like that, right? They want you to stay on their website. So most companies and most websites, whether it's a news website or source, or whether it's something else, they want you to spend time on their website. They want you to click. The more time you spend on the website, the more money they get, more ad revenue, right? So they want to, you know, get your information or get your attention so that you'll click on it, right? Malicious intent, obviously that's out there. But I would say it's probably like, yes, there are people who maliciously want to fool you or misrepresent something, but in general, I don't think everyone has malicious intent when they're sharing fake things. I think they might just not know, or like I said, are trying to get a reaction out of someone. And of course, there's propaganda, right? So propaganda is, just the stuff that's completely um, untrue, or, we know what propaganda is, hopefully. But one question you can ask yourself is, what is the motivation of the information? So, whoever's sharing it, whether it's your friend sharing it on their social media feed, or whether it's, someone you're watching social media, TikTok or Instagram or whatever, or reading something. If someone's sharing information, what's their motivation? Obviously, we hope news channels are accurate, but they aren't always, because sometimes they're just trying to get us to click on stuff. And social media is the same way, honestly, right? Like, you might follow someone on TikTok or Instagram who's super awesome and great and wonderful, but all of like those influencers are getting paid money to make ads, right? That's basically marketing now. And so they might be awesome and great, and they might be completely genuine and nice people, and they also might be getting paid to talk about a certain product or a certain trip or whatever, right? So always just ask yourself, what's the motivation of the information I'm consuming? Why is this out there? Is it for clicks? Is it an ad? Is it, someone, what am I supposed to be learning from this, or what's their motivation? And as I touched on before, when we're talking about the evolution of information, one of the reasons that media literacy is so important is because we have less time to process information than we used to. Um, Obviously, back in the day, before even books, no one had any books, right? Books weren't published. And so we people, they were a rare commodity, right? So we just had storytelling. Then we finally got books. Then we get, newspapers and articles. Then people kind of shifted to blogs for a while. It was a really big deal in the early 2000s. Then we switched to social media and Twitter. And memes, where we're just kind of like sharing funny things and little, snarky comments. And then we're all the way to here, where, basically now we just consume things in, a minute or two videos, right? And unfortunately, what that means is that people don't take the time to pause or to ponder or to read things more in depth, right? And it's not just kids, we all do this. We're scrolling and we see a snippet about something, or we see a news article or a story that's presented in a quick way, and we might read just a little bit of it, but not necessarily the whole thing, right? We might not click further. We might not even click on an actual source. As Heather, mentioned, we need sources for sure. But we might not even do that because we're just busy scrolling, clicking, we're, looking at 20 different things at one time. All of that is what happens in general, So it's just one of those things that media and information has gotten to a point where it's so small and isolated that we've lost the ability to, when we read a book, we sit down and think about it. If we had the newspaper, we would, we could read it and take our time and kind of look at it again, or process information in different ways. So one of the issues that we have when we're talking about people who share information and what's accurate and not, is this quote. Basically, it's pretty accurate. The problem is that we are encountering opposing views in the age of social media. It's not like reading them in a newspaper while sitting alone. It's like hearing them from the opposing team while sitting with our communities. We bond with our team by yelling at the fans of the other one. And I think I like this because I feel like it's true. But also, we're huge sports fans in my family, and this is very accurate, right? Sports culture, you demonize the other side, and you get really excited and talk and all of those things. With the people who like you, and you get really angry at the other side. But this is misleading, just the way that like news is misleading, or different agencies or articles or things can be misleading because they're trying to elicit a response out of you. And so the best way to do that is to polarize you, right? But even in sports culture, as fans, we might hate the other team and hate the other players and be so mad because that foul wasn't called or whatever it is. But if you've ever actually watched a sporting event and watch the teams later, all of them are generally friends. I mean, not all of them, but a lot of them have played with each other on different teams. They know each other from different experiences. So they don't hate each other half as much as we hate them. And that's what makes sports fun and exciting and like involved, right, with the team and the crowd. Like, it doesn't do any good for everyone to be like best friends, but it's also not accurate of real life, right? It's just supposed to be in that moment. And that's kind of how social media operates, is that if we have different sides, then we can be yelling at each other, and then we create some kind of competition, when really that's not supposed to be how friendships work or interactions on a social level work. But that's essentially how social media works. So this is the question, what happens when we consume media in smaller and smaller packages? And I've kind of already talked about this, so I won't dwell on it. But, essentially we're just kind of, we're not actually discerning that information very well, right? Because we're just going quickly, we're reading only tidbits or snippets of information. So, I think in general, this is an accurate statement. Most people don't want to spread misinformation, but the context gets confused. There other things catch their attention, and there are other factors than just truth and accuracy. And also, they don't really understand what the factors of truth and accuracy are. They really think maybe something is true. I talked about this last week with a group of people, and they said, I don't think generally people assume that it's untrue. That there, no one's like, not no one, but most people are not maliciously sharing something that's untrue, right? They just think that it is true, but they also don't take any amount of effort to actually vet or verify the information. So one thing about bias, bias is defined from dictionary.com as a tendency or trend, inclination, feeling, or opinion, especially one that is preconceived or unreasoned. I think we all have bias. It's kind of what I said initially about how we all are in different bubbles. I don't think or believe that bias means that something is untrue. Just because we have a bias towards something doesn't necessarily mean it's untrue. It could be untrue, but a bias does not always equal a lie, right? Sometimes it does. Sometimes people let their biases get in the way of seeing a truth, but also sometimes someone could just be biased, and it doesn't necessarily make it completely false. So it's important to recognize the biases that we have, as we interact with media and read things and all that good stuff. So here's an example of that concept. There can be, we're in Utah, so I use this example. But a fact would be, that Salt Lake City is in Utah and Burger King is a fast food restaurant, right? Opinion is that I like it, or, I don't like Burger King, whatever. But a bias would be something that it's the prettiest city or it's more unhealthy. Like, those are all biases, and they could be untrue or they could be true. I don't know. I'm not really sure. But the point is that we can have an opinion about something that's ours. We can have a bias about something based on our surroundings. If I say I live in Salt Lake and I think it's the prettiest city, that I could be biased because maybe I don't consider any other city, or I've never lived anywhere else. That's not true, but I'm just using this example. But it doesn't necessarily make it untrue. I don't know. Maybe all the other cities are ugly. I don't know. I know that's not true, but the point is that you can have a bias about something, and see something from a different frame of reference and not necessarily realize, or it doesn't necessarily mean that you're lying or that you're trying to spread false information, right? So typically, the people with the most extreme political views express the most bias in what they read. While on the flip side, those who are the most skeptical of the media consume the most biased media. So I thought this was interesting because it's basically, like typically um, if you are the most skeptical, you generally end up going to what affirms what you believe. And so you end up actually consuming more biased media than if you didn't, if you were less skeptical. Sorry, this looks like a little blurry and I apologize, but this is kind of disseminating the different types of media that we have available to us. So if you kind of look at the top, it talks about, this is journalism, entertainment, publicity, propaganda, and raw information. And if you go through and look at this chart a little bit, you can see that they have different goals, right? So one goal is to inform, but, you know, obviously entertainment is amusement. We see nowadays that like journalism and entertainment, this line is getting pretty blurred, right? They have to get clicks, they have to get views, they have to get likes. And so there's a lot of this that's getting blurred. We hope that there is still some legitimacy out there, but at the end of the day, it's kind of on us to explore and define those things on our own, which is the hard part, which is what we're talking about. But there's a lot of propaganda, and really the best way to find legitimacy is through the primary sources, right? And so this is raw information that doesn't pass through anyone. And so it is a primary source, but generally not a objective primary source, right? Um, so logic helps us guide decisions, but emotions get us there. And so one thing you want to think about when you're thinking about media literacy or trying to teach or explain what it is or why it's important is what are, a question to ask is how are you guiding your online choices? What are things that are guide what you do, what you click on, what your feed looks like. Talking about bias, we follow the people we're interested in. So we create our own bubbles of information. And we could say, on the one hand, that it's important to follow different sources and to make sure that we're completely well read. And that's all valuable and important. And it's also important to realize that it's okay if we know that we're in a bubble, as long as we're acknowledging it. Like if we're like, a lot of stuff has been going on in the world and I just can't deal with it right now. It's okay to like create a bubble for you of a safe space, but you also have to realize that that there's information you're not necessarily going to understand. Sometimes I have to do that for myself with social media. I might unfollow people who just say or do or post things that I just don't want to see or read because it just makes me angry. But one of the reasons I do that is to save myself from being annoyed with them so that when I actually see them in person, I can still be friends with them because I don't want to be annoyed with them and I want to just be in a safe space. So one of the things that you want to think about when you're talking about media is, are you sharing something because it's true or because it prompted an emotion, right? And like I said, we've all done it. We all read something or watch something or look at something and have an instant response, an instant emotional response. And so we think, what's the best thing that we should do? Well, usually people click share because they're trying to validate information, right? They're trying to get validation from themselves, not validate information. They're trying to get validation for themselves. They want to go ahead and like get someone else to agree with them and make sure that they think the same thing or share it with someone else who's going to like or share or whatever. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but obviously we've gone down this path of some pretty slippery slopes where people keep sharing misinformation. Like when I talked about satire, there's been many, many stories of people sharing um, articles from the Onion and other satirical like sites which have admitted to being satirical, but people are sharing it as if it's true, right? And going crazy and overreacting and all those things. Um, so as we've talked about, like the difference about how do we know if it's true or not true, the reality is that truthfulness does not motivate sharing online. In general, people aren't really taking the time to find out if it's true on their own. They kind of just, if it resonates with them on an emotional level, they'll just assume it's true because it's validating something that they think or feel. So a study published recently tracked thousands of users, only six of users interacting with false information, only 16% called it accurate. but when asked if they would share it, 51% said they would. So even when people aren't really sure if it's accurate or not, they'll still share it anyways if it has create some kind of emotion with them. And that's kind of why we're in the problem we're in today with inaccurate information. People just share stuff and post stuff based on what elicits an emotion and not much else. So when we're talking about bubbles and how we can pop them, one tool is lateral reading. So lateral reading, essentially what that means is that you might read something and then instead of just relying on that source, you either click on the references or the footnotes, or more importantly for lateral reading is you pull up multiple sources of the same thing. So one way you can do lateral reading is there's different it's just Google that information and click on various sources, right? One thing that you can do is go to different websites that have an accurate representation of different things, like All Sides Media Now actually does like right, center, left for a lot of headlines, and then also knowing what sources you're consuming and how accurate they are. Another website is it's not on here. I thought I had a screenshot. It's called Advance Media, and they show a graph of the different websites and sources and where they are on the scale. And it's like a big axis graph and a graph and things like that. And the key thing that I like about that one is that it shows people where news sources are, but it also breaks it down. Like you could have your favorite news source be more accurate online, but less accurate on TV or an editorial or print or video, right? And so all of it could be, it's not just a cut and dry answer. Like you could be watching one specific news station and maybe they are pretty neutral on print, but when they're on the news, it's more entertainment and they're definitely more right or left leaning. So it's important to understand and recognize where people lie on those sources, because it's actually, you just know what information you're consuming. Again, that doesn't mean that someone or a source has a bias means that something that they're reporting is untrue. It could be, or it could be true, but definitely with a very obvious bias, right? And so that's kind of the key, is to take the time to check multiple sources and kind of see where you are. And that's honestly the hardest part for people, because people don't have time, or people yes, I'm going to type it. Sorry, I have a screenshot. Someone just asked for that, so I'm going to add fonts. I was trying to decide if it was worth me pulling it up live or if it would mess up my presentation, but this is the website. Hold on, let me get the link. They have like AI where it's called the media bias chart. I'm going to get this link, and it's live. They update it constantly. So when I say constantly, like it says the most accurate, the last time they updated it was January 2022. So they're constantly running AI, but it's interactive. You can click on it and kind of go through the axes. I'll just put it on my screen real fast so I can show you what I mean. And this is the important part of this, because I'm really not trying to advocate that one thing is better or not than the other, but it's understanding that bias, right? So the nice thing about the reason why I like this one is because they're tracking stuff. You can kind of see here that they're tracking different sources, and that the axis, it's not just a simple here's middle, right, left. There's axis like fact reporting, like analysis, or opinion, and things like that. So you want to pay attention to both, like all the different axes, like not just this one. And you can click on this yourself and you can dial down into it. And so that's what I mean by, you can see there's multiple times where different news sources, like, I don't know, CNN and NBC and even Fox, and there's like various places on the axis that they are, because different mediums create different sources, if that makes sense. So I'll close this now. So I personally like clicking on it. I do have a screenshot that I sometimes share, but I think it's important to, if you're teaching this or you're going over this with kids or anyone else, I think it's valuable to click on it because you can see it in lifetime. And the other one that I mentioned is called All Sides Now, and I'll pull that up real quick. they've been proven to be slightly right. So I don't know how they try to be as balanced as possible. But what they do is they post headlines and then they show you if it's left, right, or center. So this is their little guide. Um, and so again, I don't advocate for one side or the other. It's about just understanding where that bias is, right? And you can kind of see the different headlines from on a certain topic, um, and the different ways. Here's another thing about Biden. Here's another thing about Putin. So you can see the different ways that they disseminate information, and it lists the source and where they are on the scale. So this is called. So they try to be as unbalanced as possible. I don't know. But it's helpful because you can kind of, what I like about it, even if you don't believe that they're unbalanced, you can kind of see from different sources um, how different sides represent the same issue. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop. So I think it's a useful tool. So that's an important thing to do. So the next question is, how do you identify fake news? So one way is to double check sources, right? The other thing is to kind of ask yourself these questions. Who is sending the message? Are you getting the message from news that's like the entertainment side, or are you getting news where like they're actually reporting on something? Is it a friend sending it to you? Is it, like I said, an Instagram influencer trying to tell you how great this luggage they got is, right? Why was it shared? What's the why? And what techniques were they using to attract or hold your attention? I think everybody knows that video is keen in terms of marketing potential right now. I used to do marketing a lot, so algorithms are real, they exist, and they're there for a reason. They're trying to hold your attention. That's how they make money. Again, it doesn't mean everything that they're telling you is wrong or bad, but you just need to be aware that algorithms exist and it's a real thing. And the thing is, how might the message be interpreted? It's kind of back to what's the goal, right? What's the motivation for the information? Are they posting it because they want to get a reaction? They want shares, they want likes? Are they posting it to be informative? Are they posting it just to include someone in something they found? It really depends on the motivation of the person and the site or the whatever, the channel, whatever it is. So, one way that you can help yourself disseminate different information is understand yourself. So, that's why we say know thyself, right? Recognize beliefs that might be conspiracy theories, and not because you're dumb or stupid or you're gullible, but because maybe you don't have all the facts, or maybe certain things trigger you. I know stuff triggers me. I have a 5-year-old, so I'm drawn to things with kids or with sports or whatever it is that we like. Those things trigger us a lot more. So recognizing what triggers you and what you're going to be drawn to, again, that doesn't mean you're not allowed to consume that information, but it does mean you want to make sure that you're paying attention. And regularly ask yourself, how am I feeling? How do I feel when I'm consuming this information? Is this something that's making me feel good inside? Is this making me feel cranky, frustrated? Like I said, that's why I unsubscribe to some people. I might like them as friends and I want to keep them as friends because I think that I can be friends with people who don't agree with me, but I also don't want to be irritated with stupid stuff that they post, right? So if it's making me angry, I'll unsubscribe just so that I can stay friends with them. Think about the emotional response evoked in what you consumed. Also, try to visualize the other side. You can disagree all day long with someone, but at the end of the day, realize that on the other side is always a person, right? I mean, I know there's bots and things, but in general, the other side is also a person. So try to visualize who that is and think about what they're thinking, what they're feeling. Recognize that you can't change the world all the time, or you might not be able to, but you can always change your reaction to something, right? So being aware of that, being aware of what people are consuming, how people are reacting. Again, it's not your job to please everybody. It's not also your job to vet every source of information for everybody. But if you're consuming something or you're sharing something, instead of just clicking something instantly because it created a reaction out of you, unless it's just funny, right? Make sure that you're like, is this something that's actually from a trusted, reliable, accurate source, right? That helps to like stop the spread of misinformation. So another thing to talk about with this is algorithms, which I mentioned a little bit. Algorithms exist, right? We've now all learned a little bit more about algorithms, and before it was just marketing people like myself who knew them. But algorithms exist for a reason, right? A lot of times when I talk to kids in schools, they're always like, "Yeah, my parents like they say that algorithms are bad, or like they're stalking us or following us." I mean, they are, but at the same time, there's a reason why algorithms exist, right? I mean, I know I can't see who's here, but I can imagine if I asked, and or we were in person and I said who uses anything other than Google, not many people would say that they did. And the reality is that there's a reason, right? Google's really good at what it does. Its algorithms are amazing. The reason we use Google so much is because every time we Google something, like the right information we're looking for pops up right away. It's in the first couple of hits, right? The reason they're so good at that is because of their algorithms. If their algorithms weren't good and we, Googled something, it would be something we didn't want to see every time, we would stop using it. We would go to a different site like Bing or, whatever. So they have to track your data. They have to know what you're clicking on. They have to know what you're looking for and what you're interested in and your location, because that's how they give you the results that you want, and that's what makes you keep coming back, right? So I get that it's a little stalkerish, and I get that people have issues with, data and privacy, and all those things are definitely important, but you have to recognize that they're there and they exist. And in all social media, they're driven by algorithms, right? So this quote is saying, it's difficult to figure out if an algorithm is biased or fair, even for computer experts. A lot of times they're so complex. There's, AI behind it, and there's not a lot of breakdown, and that's intentional. They don't really want people to be figuring them out. They just need them in order to produce the information and content that that will make you happy. It's all about clicks and likes, right? It's all about staying on a website longer. I mean, it's when I talk about this with kids, it's as simple as Netflix always showing you, you know, suggestions based on what you've already watched, because then you stay on the website longer, right? It's just kind of common sense, but that principle applies to basically anything, any social media or website you're ever going to interact with. It's the same concept as Netflix showing you, your suggestions. So one thing to keep in mind with bias and algorithms is they learn from a few things. They learn from common words, stereotypes. They're not, algorithms are based on computers and AI, so of course they're not humans. They're not targeting you in a malicious way. They're just targeting you based on what you're clicking on. So if you're clicking on, a certain thing, you're going to see more of that thing. And like I said, we've kind of figured that out already. Now there's memes about people. I saw a meme the other day about a wife clicking on a bunch of weird stuff on her husband's phone so it would, spam him for a while. So we're kind of learning that a little bit more. But one thing we just kind of need to remember is that algorithms are being driven by what we're clicking on and what we're liking. They don't have emotions, but they create emotions out of us, right? They encourage some negativity and some bias because they're just showing you the same things over and over again. And so if you've gone down a rabbit hole of misinformation, you're just going to keep getting misinformation because your algorithm's going to keep showing you the same stuff. So, it's always good to take a step back and try to remember that algorithms are not meant to give you truth. They're just meant to make you happy. But we may or may not be right about that, what we're happy about. So that's kind of all that I wanted to talk about. Does anybody have questions or comments or other things that they're wondering about with media literacy, or any questions that they have? I didn't quite realize that was the last one, but any questions or concerns they have? I know we're a little bit earlier than normal. Um, my name is Karina. Sorry. I signed in our a normal account. So this is my name. If on our website we post the recordings of these webinars. And we also have great free resources on both the digital parenting website, as well as there's some blogs and some recordings from some of our old webinars. And anyone who registered, even if they didn't attend or if they left early or came late, we'll send them a recording of this as well. Um, so yeah, so our main website is Response. And we also have social media. We do post some stuff like these tips and things like that on there as well, on Instagram and Facebook. I think the Instagram is, double check, changed it a couple times. Yeah, it's just digital response ability. So I know someone asked about the references. They're like after this slide, I promise. So this will get sent out to you, and it's all the different references that we have from this information. Awesome, cool, Julia. Yeah, we do have a PD program. Is that what you've been doing with digital response, like with the digital citizenship courses? Awesome. Yeah, we created that. And it has a lot of the foundation of digital citizenship. We do these free webinars every month, and they're different things. They're not always media literacy. I just did that because I just taught this at a conference last week. So I decided I would do it today. Yeah, the modules are really fun. They're really great. And we have that as well. So like I said, we do these every month. We're taking August off because it's summer and people, aren't really coming, but every month we do them, and anyone who attended live will get a certificate. So if that helps with any kind of CE credit, obviously you're welcome to use it. We send them out like a day or two after they're done. So that's great. Good. We send them out, I promise. So just takes her a day or two. So so she'll send out whoever attended live, and anyone who registered, like I said, will get an email with a replay. So even if you weren't able to attend. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to contact us at any time. If there's anything else I will, Julia. Thank you. If there's anything else you need, let us know. I'm going to end a little early since not a lot of other people are talking, and that's totally fine, but you'll still get the CE credit. But if there's anything you need, you're always welcome to email us or let us know. And if there's anything we can help you with, just let us know. And if you get on our mailing list, we email people when we have the next webinar scheduled, and it's always the second Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. So you just kind of watch our emails or any of our social media channels for the registration link if you want. So let us know if we can help you. I don't think anyone else has anything else, so I'll end here, but if you need anything else, feel free to let us know. Thanks, Julia. I appreciate it.